Hey, thanks, Alex. One of the things that you obviously with the talking points, I think it's great with the facts. It's fantastic. But one thing that I really do appreciate with what you've been doing has been you're also quite the persuasion guy as well. And I saw your thread with Scott Adams, which is good, another a mutual acquaintance of ours who's also quite the persuader as well. And when you have all the facts on your side, everyone always, we've all heard the phrase, facts don't care about your feelings. Well, the reverse is true too. Feelings don't care about facts quite often, especially when it comes to the other side, right? The most, the news of the past 24 hours or so demonstrates that as well. So, what is the best tactic that you found, not necessarily just to win over folks on, who might be on the fence or to arm people, but more importantly, it is how have you been able to either convert, I suppose, for lack of a better term, some of the more environmental extremist types, or just to clown them. I mean, really, I think it's effective mockery and making people far less credible and making fools of them. I think is actually really effective. It works on the other. They've done it to us pretty well. So what are some of those really effective tactics you found?
Yeah, so for an in-depth explanation of this, we'll refer you very strongly to chapter 11 of Fossil Future, but well, you guys all get it. So don't. Oh, by the way, if anyone is watching this, I know we have some people watching, just message me, Lincoln, alex@alexepstein.com. Just email me. And if you want, I'll send you a bunch of resources. Okay, so here's the thing. And basically, I'm going to tell you to do what I always do and what I did today. So the key is, I believe the number one key to persuasion is framing. So what does that mean? Well, you think about a framework. So a building has a framework. It's a starting structure, right? The starting structure has a huge influence over the rest of the building. Just like a building has a starting structure or framework, so do our ideas and our conversations. There are certain starting points that you need to be very aware of. So, the one I'll highlight now, but there are several other key ones, is this idea of, are you looking carefully at both the benefits and the side effects? Are you looking at the full context? 98% of conversations about fossil fuels start with the person being predisposed to only look at negative side effects and to wildly exaggerate, or what I would call catastrophizing. So even, what you were talking about, Nick, with the Greenpeace person comes, you're like, oh, what about the oil spill? Like, as soon as that happens, I know that person has not been looking at the full context, right? So if I just jump in and I try to refute them on the oil spill, the methodology hasn't changed, right? It's the bad method. And it's the way to think of it as a bias. It's like, people sometimes have biases against, say, in-laws. And if you hear like, oh, this in-law did all these amazing things, and yet this person is just complaining about this little thing, you think, oh, that person has a bias and I can't really trust them on it. So I want to be aware of the bias and I want to correct it. Now, one way would be, hey, to tell them, hey, you're really biased. That doesn't usually work so well. So what I do is here's the magic of it, though. Nobody thinks it's a good idea to be biased, and nobody will disagree with trying to be unbiased. So what I'll ask them is, hey, just step back. Like, okay, I love to talk about oil spills, but before we get into that, would you agree? So like oil spills, that's a negative side effect of fossil fuels. Would you agree that we have to look at both the negative side effects of fossil fuels and also the benefits? And that with solar and wind, we have to do the same. So we can't just look at the positives of solar and wind and the negatives of fossil fuels, right? We have to look carefully at the benefits and side effects of both. And what do you think people say? Yeah, you have no option, right? Nobody's going to say, no, I'm going to be biased. So, but what happens then is you reframe the conversation, right? You change the starting structure to one where somebody had the method of only looking at and exaggerating the side effects and ignoring the benefits. You change the structure to where they have now agreed to look at both the benefits and the side effects carefully. This relates to another persuasion person, Robert Cialdini, who has one of his principles called integrity. And so this is when you get somebody to identify as something. Like if you get somebody to identify as adventurous, it's easier to get them to go on a motorcycle once they say, yeah, I am adventurous. Oh, I guess I will go on that motorcycle. It's like, yeah, I do believe we should look at the full context. Okay, I guess I'm going to do that. So what you find is the behavior in the conversations radically improves. And even if you can't do it in a conversation, just like I'm doing here, I state really clearly, hey, this is how I think about it, right? I look carefully at the benefits and the negative side effects. And when I say that, people are like, yeah, I agree with that. And so what it does is it reframes it. And so everything I do in persuasion is having an awareness of what is the starting framework and what can I do to change it that will be persuasive. And the magical thing about reframing is often, not always, but often, and a lot in this issue, you can change these little things at the beginning that totally changed the way they think about the issue. So there are some others, but that's kind of the most obvious one that I learned from. So once you reframe it, it totally changes the complexion of the conversation. So if you were to take one lesson from today, it wouldn't be necessarily one talking point. It'd be like, yeah, let's look at the positives and the negatives carefully. And if you have those conversations, it really changes it, has an amazing effect.